I believe that it is easier to learn how to do something when it is shown early on, so we don't develop ways of how to treat ourselves that's not equivalent to self-love, which means self-judgment, self-hate, uh, lack of self-trust, all these things. But we do have the capacity to learn. We do have the capacity to unlearn things as well. So how do we learn self-love? Well, let's say somebody didn't love themselves for most of their life until they realized it, maybe in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever it is. So then they realize that the whole time, the way that they've been treating themselves have not equate to self-love. But once they realized it and they have the intention to love themselves, that's the first step. It's the first step towards change. And then from there, they learn. Yeah, just like how people learn how to do things. I mean, it's I think the idea of what you're saying of like, how do people do it if they never were taught? Well, I think this is the power of where we're at now in our society with technology, is we basically can learn whatever it is that we want to learn, and we can do it at rapid speeds. And we have the tools and resources to learn. So whatever it is that we're not good at, we can learn. But I do agree that it is much more difficult to learn when we're older than when we're younger, but it is still possible, and people do it every day. And that's what we're here to do, you know. And so I want to dive in a little bit more and elaborate, because something you mentioned there, let's say somebody who's like really hateful, or somebody who's doesn't seem to be treating people nicely, but you said, but they love themselves. They go, I love myself, and but I'm mean to people. I think how do we define self-love? I don't think it's something that's just said. If we say we love ourselves and we tell other people that we love ourselves, does that really mean self-love? Or does that just, or in other words, can we say something that we don't mean? If we say it in that way, it would be very obvious that the answer is yes, right? We can say things that we don't mean. And so therefore, whether or not we say it to other people, or whether or not we even believe it to ourselves, doesn't matter, because that doesn't represent the truth. That's just one part of it. There's a big part of it, and it's just actions. All right, it's really simple. So how do we treat ourselves if we love ourselves? And then in turn, how will we treat other people if we loved ourselves? So let's look at ourselves. How will we treat ourselves? You can give love even if you don't receive it. And the reason why is because the source can come from within. And I think this is where the key of self-love comes in. Because when we love ourselves, then that means we become our own source. We are taking care of ourselves. And then when we take care of ourselves, we feel loved because we are taking care of ourselves, right? We don't beat up ourselves. We don't judge ourselves. We don't force ourselves. We don't say mean things to ourselves. We are gentle to ourselves when we need to be gentle. So we're taking care of ourselves nicely, the way we would if we really love something, we take care of it. And we love ourselves, we take care of ourselves. So then now we become the source. So then we don't have to now depend on it coming from somebody else. Now, if somebody gives us love or they give us praise, it's nice. And it's just bonus. It's just the icing on the cake. But if we don't receive it, we still have the capacity to give it because we become the source. And so sometimes when we are really, really busy, when um, we start to fall off a little on our self-care, then we stop being the source. And then now we may not have enough energy to give to others. Now we may need to receive in order to give. But when we are filling up our own cup and giving the love to ourselves constantly, we are fulfilled. And now we become the source to give to others. So I think when I believe that you do a lot of things for yourself, you take care of yourself, uh, you're constantly thinking of ways to become healthier, to improve, to develop yourself. And all of this is to help with yourself. Now, Scott brought up a good point earlier, which was the actions, can be a little bit dicey. They can represent different things. He was saying that one example, somebody goes to the gym and they work out really, really hard. We can say, are they taking care of themselves because they're working out really hard? Maybe, or they see such lack in themselves that they have to work out really hard in order to make themselves feel better because they feel very lack, right? The action is both the same. It's working out really hard at the gym, but the reason behind it can be two different complete reasons, right? And that's true. Ultimately, I think one way to look at it, because I think when we look at the human body, when we look at ourselves, we are made up of three things, right? And out of these three things of mind, body, and spirit, out of the spirit that doesn't change, then we have just the mind and the body. And then now if we look at the mind and the body, on the mind part, we can say, are we saying mean things to ourselves? Are we constantly comparing ourselves to other people? Because if we say mean things to ourselves, we can all agree that that probably doesn't mean self-love, right? So then if we are comparing ourselves to other people, then we can say that we don't accept ourselves. So we have to constantly be reassured for ourselves that we are good enough by comparing to other people. And then if we compare to somebody who's lower, we feel superior. That's what Matt was saying, right? And then if we feel superior, that doesn't actually help because then we look down at other people. And then vice versa, we compare ourselves to somebody who is doing better in some area of life. And then now we think we are less, which isn't any good as well. So this comparing and competing is a form of non-self-love. And if we constantly do that, whether we say we love ourselves or not really wouldn't matter because our actions will show differently. So then that's all in the mind. And that's all in the mind. Right now, we haven't got into the body yet. We're just looking in the mind. And then in the body, how can we tell if we have self-love? Well, if we are always being angry, for example, if we're always being angry, then this is where we talked about, why will we be angry? What is actually happening that allows us to constantly be angry or be stressed or be worried? And one way to look at this is it is the non-acceptance of what is happening at this very moment right now. We are upset. We don't want whatever happened to happen. So we just got cut off. Are we okay with being cut off? If we are, there's nothing to be upset about. Like with Steve, right? You live in Asia, I live in Asia. If I was to get mad every time I cut me off, I would just be mad every time I drive. And if I try to get them back, I wouldn't be driving. I'd be missing a limb because you get in an accident. You don't try to cut anybody off here. You drive when you need to drive fast. You don't drive. That just doesn't happen here in Asia. It's too dangerous to try to have any type of road rage. So if we were to feel upset, if we were to feel angry about something, then that basically represents that we are not okay with whatever is happening. We are saying that something is influencing us. It changes the way that we see ourselves. If we get worried about something, and we're saying that this situation that's happening, it is going to somehow influence our personal value, influence our selves in some way. And we need that. We cannot have that change. Let's say influence is the quality of our life, and we need the quality of our life to be a certain way. Why? Because if it's a certain way, we would see ourselves as being better. It would bring us superiority. There's something that's constantly influencing this foundation thing, which is the way that we see ourselves. And so we would get upset, we would get worried, we would get stressed. But if we don't change the way that we see ourselves, because we love ourselves, we have self-love, which basically is actually equivalent to just self-acceptance. That's really what self-love is. It's not really this idea of somebody telling themselves that I love myself. Let me tell everybody I love myself, or judging themselves as being good. That actually doesn't equivalent to self-love. That's the opposite, because they're just judging themselves. And judgment, whether good or bad, is all the same. If I judge myself as being good, that means I look at somebody else as being bad. And that also means that I cannot be anything else. So now I hold my expectation to where I'm good. So if I do something that's bad, I don't even want to look at it. I don't even want to accept the fact that I did something bad, because I judge myself as good. If I accept that I just did something bad, then that means I must be lying, or or the way I judge myself as good is not true anymore. You see, that's like me saying, hey guys, I'm so good. I do a lot of good things. I do good things all the time. And then suddenly I did something that was bad. And it was by accident, but I did something that was bad. I wouldn't even tell anybody, because if I did, I would look like a liar. Somebody would go, Mike, you just said you're such a good person. You just did something bad. And I go, right. Yeah, well, that was a mistake. Yeah, don't count that one. Right? That doesn't. So then what happens? Well, I wouldn't want to even look at any of the bad. I wouldn't recognize it anymore. I would just pretend like it didn't happen, which people do all the time. Right? So this is what judgment does, even when it's good, right? They judge themselves as all of this stuff. Now they have to keep up with their judgment. If they go, I'm beautiful. Okay. Well, why do you think you're beautiful? Well, because everybody tells me I'm beautiful. Okay. So now that means they got to make sure everybody continues to tell them that they're beautiful. And to pop that bubble, all it takes is one person goes, you're not beautiful, you're average. What? I'm average? No. Their whole beautiful plan just exploded. Now they can't let it go, right? Someone goes, no, don't listen to them. No, nobody's ever told me I was average. Now they have such a big problem. They're angry. So that's why we don't want to judge ourselves as being good or bad or beautiful, ugly, or any of that. There's no judgment. When we judge ourselves, this basically means we don't accept ourselves. So going back into self-love, what does self-love really mean? It means we accept ourselves, like what we were all talking about, like what you mentioned as well, Mona. And accepting means we don't judge ourselves. And acceptance means we are okay with our life, not just ourselves, but ourself means our life. Ourself means our relationship. Ourself means what I have, what I don't have. Ourself means my body. Ourself means our title, our work. It's all part of ourself, right? It's all part of our life, what we do. So that means we're okay with all of it. Our self also means how fast I get to this place, the way that I drive, whether or not I'm good at driving or bad at driving. It's all still part of our life. So that means we accept all of it. So now when we don't accept it, we would probably get mad at something. We'd get worried, we get stressed out. But when we accept things, there's nothing to be stressed out about. There's only action and non-action. There's only something we either need to do or not do. Somebody cut us off, what do we need to do? Either we need to slow down or we're going to hit them in the back. Or let's say we're totally late and they cut us off. Now we need to switch lanes. We got to drive a little faster so we make it on time. There's only something we need to do or not do, but everything else is not necessary. So going back into self-love, I think self-love ultimately is just the acceptance of ourself and everything that's connected to our life. And then when we accept it, everything is good. When there's non-acceptance, what we see is on the mind, we complain, we blame, we get mad at things. And in the level of our body is we experience a lot of emotions, a lot of negative emotions. And so, yeah, so that's self-love.